And one of my favorite things in the world is when somebody says, hey, how can you help me? And I can think of all the different people I know in the world that could be an encouragement to them.
What are the secrets that drive the businesses you love or nonprofits you admire? Join us as we uncover the surprising ideas at the intersection of causes and brands. I'm Dave Raley.
And I'm Carly Berna. Each episode, learn from leaders of nonprofits and companies that will give you insights that you can put into action. This is the Purpose and Profit Podcast. Season 6 of the Purpose and Profit Podcast is brought to you by Dickerson Baker.
Welcome to the show today. Our guest is William Norvell, a top 1% podcaster, investor, and trusted advisor to faith-driven entrepreneurs around the world. William co-founded Faith-Driven Entrepreneur, Faith-Driven Investor, and as co-founder of Forte today, he's on a mission to democratize mental health in the workplace. With an MBA from Stanford, a background in investing and global leadership, William brings deep expertise to the intersection of faith, family, and business. You're going to love this conversation with William Norvell. Welcome to the show, William.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
How does it feel when people give you the bio read? You're like, do you see a common thread when you look across? We're talking about investment and entrepreneurship and faith, and what's the common thread for you?
The number one thing is I just feel so great when people read my bio. It's like, man, read that in the morning to my wife every day when I get home. It makes you sound.
Can you read that separately?
Makes you sound so distinguished and so good, right? I feel good about myself coming into this conversation. We'll start there. The common thread for me really, so finance was my first love. So that's, you see that thread. I don't know if it came out, but I did investment banking. I did private equity, actually for Sharia compliant firm based out of Bahrain for a while. Got my MBA, went back into private equity with Sovereign's Capital. And I just think those core skills were just amazing to learn. And then I had a moment about 4 to 5 years ago where a mentor sat me down, and actually Patrick Lencioni sat me down on one of our podcasts, A Faith-Driven Entrepreneur, and I was telling him who I was. And I had just done his Working Genius assessment, and he was trying to pair what I was saying with what the assessment said who I was. And live on the podcast, and Pat and I don't really know each other that well, he goes, I don't think that's right. And I was like, tell me more. And it was really fascinating. He basically said if you've never seen Working Genius, there are 6 mechanisms of it. And
I will say, William, we are fans of Working Genius. Don't assume our listeners are, though. So 6 types of work we all have to do, right?
You may be able to do this better than I can, but you have your 2 working geniuses, your 2 working competencies, and then you have, I forgot the negative part, the working...
Frustrations,
right? It's not super negative. But basically what he said while reading, I told him what my report said, and he said, William, it actually sounds like you've been working out of your competencies your entire life. My competencies were tenacity and discernment, and my geniuses were galvanizing and enabling. And he really stopped me and said, wow, if you've been living in spreadsheets for the last 15 years in PowerPoints and really trying to figure out how companies work and moving those along and being on boards, which is what I'd effectively been doing, he said, I feel like you're about to burn out. I feel like you're on the edge, honestly, if you want me to challenge you. And that, in addition to a couple other conversations, really reframed who I thought I was, which was that person, which was a guardian of organizations, was a guardian of data and knowledge, into, I think I'm actually more of a creative connector type person that loves getting out there, making things happen, rallying people around an idea. And one of my favorite things in the world is when somebody says, hey, how can you help me? And I can think of all the different people I know in the world that could be an encouragement to them. And turns out that's actually really effective for a startup founder. And so combination of Patrick and hanging around with my mentor, Henry Kasner, too long. If you hang around Henry long enough, you'll be forced to start a company. Those 2 things really pushed me into this new journey. And it's been fun to, take all the skills I learned. But the common thread was finance. And then there's this distinct moment where my world kind of changed about 4 to 5 years ago. And I realized not that I'm not that person, but that may not be my genius person. And that's kicked me off into this new journey of entrepreneurship.
Well, and we all, for those of our listeners that are familiar with Working Genius, if you're not, it's really about what gives you energy, what you're really, what gives you joy, right? And so much of us, especially folks that have been in the working world for a period of time, can get really good at stuff that just doesn't essentially light their fire. Mm-hmm. And so I love that that's a part of your journey, but to see how that has built on. In fact, thinking about your journey, I didn't mention, but you went to Bama, Alabama for undergrad.
Full time.
And then you got investment banking and private equity and Stanford. And then ultimately, this entrepreneurship journey as a part of that. How does that road shape your views on, money and purpose and leadership?
Yeah, we'll take each of them, right? Money, purpose, okay. Leadership. Money, of course, you get thrown into the fire in an investment banker. You go there for the wild work, plus the knowledge you're going to learn, plus the ridiculous hours, plus the bonus check, right? Let's be candid, right? And as a 22-year-old, I got a check that was more than my yearly salary at the end of my first year and was more than most people in my family had made. And so that was a very easy track to be attracted to. And for someone who grew up, I like to say we always had enough, but we didn't always have plenty, Mm-hmm. I don't want to act like we didn't have enough. We always did. But also things came slower and things like that. And so to be able to hold that money so early in your career and see that safety was possible if I just continued to grind was actually really my first impressions of money and being able to say, wow, look at this path. And I stayed in it for 10 years, right? And really kept grinding through that. And the safety that comes with that is just amazing, And so that was my first impressions of money. Mm-hmm. And I don't have like a really just awful negative story of investment banking. I actually really enjoyed the work. I think we did good work. I think we helped companies. I do think you get a little attached. I mean, you're set on that yearly bonus check type mentality, which is probably not the safest way to live life. Mm-hmm. There were some people, some bosses of mine that would share with me one day, you get attached to living $1 million life, but your salary is $200,000. And so people did get off kilter with that, right? If your bonus check didn't come in right. Mm-hmm. And now I have to live a little bit more of a trusting mentality that we will go year to year, that we will figure this out. That enough is enough, right? Luckily, at least in Silicon Valley, I'll speak for here, the days of, hey, you're starting a company and your VCs make you work for $40,000 a year and live on ramen noodles and things like that's gone a little bit by the wayside. You can have a living wage now, which is great. And so I feel like that's been a real journey for me to be comfortable with that. Now I have 3 small children, so it's still a grind, but it's different. Right? It's different. And, on purpose, the common theme is, I think, finding what you are really made to do and what your purpose is. I genuinely believe there is purpose in all of these organizations, right? I know I'm not one of those people that kind of throws a whole industry to the side and says, oh, you can't find purpose in finance, or that's what I realized. No, I think I could have been a really great investment banker for 25 years, and companies really need help, right? But finding your purpose is what is unique, right? And I realized over time that wasn't my purpose. Actually, a great boss in my last private equity job. It was really hard to leave. I was working for an incredible group of people, but I just felt this desire. And I'll never forget him sitting me down. And he said, William, you're really good at your job. But if I'm going to be honest, I probably should have told you this years ago. I really think you're wasting your gifts and talents. And there are people made for this job that you have, and I know them and you know them, and you're not built like them. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Doesn't mean you wouldn't be happy doing it. But gosh, this feels way more like you. And so if you don't have a mentor in your life who you can go to, who's worked with you, and ask them that question, like, does this feel like this is my purpose? Do you see that in me, right? And being able to have an open conversation with them about, why do you think this is your purpose? And do you see the same things in me? And he really was able to dissect that and say, here's why I do it. And here's who I think I was made to be and the gifts and talents I have to contribute to the world. And here's you, which you can do this pretty good, but gosh, it feels like over here it could be a much better fit for you. even though, hey, I'm not here to tell you to leave, but if you're asking my honest opinion, I'll tell you what I see. And that's just wildly valuable, right? Because figuring out the purpose, last comment on that would be, and also I'm not one of the, find your purpose and don't ever work a day in your life people. It's like, no, work's still work. I always tell young folks when I get to young folk, gosh, I'm 42. I sound so old. I got called sir on a Yosemite hike the other day. It was awful. Excuse me, sir. Could you help me out? I was like, oh my gosh.
Carly won't. Carly doesn't. She's staying quiet right now because I'm the old man on this podcast.
Yeah,
so
it's rough. But finding what, it's not that you're never going to work a day. I actually always tell people, if you enjoy 60% of your job, you're crushing it. Like, there is still work to be done. There's paperwork to be done. There are emails to be sent. So finding that place where you really feel like you're thriving a little over 50% of the time is what I tell people your purpose looks like. It doesn't look like waking up and doing a dance every morning and just being so excited to go to the office. That's awesome if you have it. If you got 95%, you're winning. But if you got 51, you're really winning too, in my opinion.
Before you talk about leadership, I just want to circle back on both money and purpose. Like you said, you worked in investment banking before. Now you work in more values-based investing.
Yes.
Talk a little bit more about what it means when you invest in something that you care about, but also still have that pressure for a return.
Yeah. One of my other amazing mentors, guy named Greg Lernahan, developed this. It's a 2x2. It's called a matrix, but that's because we call 2x2s matrix. And for him, he happens to be a Christian. He graphs it on spiritual return on the x-axis and financial return on the y-axis. And if you think about the 4 quadrants there, I think it's a great simplification for values-based investing. There's the bottom left quadrant, low spiritual, low financial return. And for those listeners that don't come from a Christian worldview, right, you can put whatever you want on that spiritual. Is it values, whatever that other axis is for you, goodness in the world and financial return or whatever that is. But I think the premise holds true, which is in the bottom left, let's say it's goodness in the world, right? You don't want to have low goodness in the world and low financial return, right? But let's go to the top left, right? I mean, you have high spiritual return and low financial return. That's, somewhat charity in some ways, maybe nonprofits, which I know a lot of your listeners are, right? There may not be a large financial return, but there's a great return in, eradicating, you might be wild return in eradicating homelessness, but low financial return. That's typically more your nonprofit bucket. There is a high financial return and low spiritual return, right? Which is just optimizing for profits, right? Which might be more traditional private equity, traditional investment banking, where literally you have a fiduciary duty to make the most money with the capital you have been given, right? That is the job, right? When I worked in private equity, basically, there's an ethical framework. As long as it's not illegal, make the most money possible, right? Mm-hmm. Then there's this top right bucket, which values-based investing, I think, really fits in where, and once again, all these can be versions of values-based, but the one I was most in was, let's try to go after a high spiritual return and a high financial return, right? And we don't think there necessarily has to be a trade-off. There can be, and those are great pockets of the market, right? You think of Kiva, you think of Hope, where it's like, hey, you are only going to get 7% back on your money, but you are going to do an incredible goodness in the world. And think about that portfolio approach for yourself of where you think you fit in purpose. I think it can be really life-giving and freeing because you then can, for me, being able to name what my purpose is and name what I'm shooting for has been really uplifting. I was talking to a great nonprofit leader. I don't know if you've met Adrian Turtinandi from Open Door Legal. His goal is to give free legal aid to the world. Mm-hmm. Right? And he's been doing it in the Bay Area for a long time. And so he's on the other end of that. His goal is free legal aid, and he is raising nonprofit dollars to do that, and the return is not valued in money. The return is valued in story. And what his investors get back is you have decreased homelessness by 5%, and you have increased the amount of people who get to keep their children and get off the streets and have a different story of life than the one they wouldn't have if they had been evicted by someone without a compassionate opportunity to have legal aid in the situation.
Yeah. Hey, so William, as I'm thinking about this, right? So there's obviously financial, like you do have these gifts around financial stewardship, help money make money, all that kind of stuff. I'm interested in the values-based investing thing. But what you make me think about as you talk about charities and nonprofits, one of the things, and you and I have even offlined about this,
Sure.
is what does it look like to create sustainable financial models for nonprofits? And part of that is fundraising and generosity. I'm deeply passionate about that. That's a core part of the work that I do in the world. But it's just interesting to me. One of the things you had said to me when we first spoke was, and I don't know if this is the exact quote, but essentially, wouldn't it be interesting if nonprofit leaders and leaders of brands and businesses worked more together on creating sustainable economic engines? And the thing that really stood out to me is in the fundraising world, which is so critical and so foundational to creating impact, is in essence, you're fundraising. Literally, they use the word fundraising in business too, right? You're fundraising 100% of the time,
Right.
versus in a startup like you've led, where you're fundraising in windows, fundraising. So just riff a little bit on what it looks like, from your business background to create a sustainable economic engine and what that looks like. Because I'm just curious what we might learn from on the cost side.
Yeah. So two things. I read a blog post, two stories. I read a blog post probably 10 years ago that talked about just the sheer amount of effort a nonprofit CEO would have to go through to get, $50,000 grant. And it's not just to get the grant, but then the reporting that you have to do for the grant, right? And that was one of the first things that made me really think about, especially here in Silicon Valley, people get $3 million seed rounds and there's nothing required to do as a CEO.
Right. You're saying in business fundraising,
Right.
it's like here's $1 million to go and grow your business. Obviously, there's some expectations in return.
There's some hopes, right? But this nonprofit CEO was actually here as well. And they said, do you know what I could do with $3 million of just capital to hope we figure out a solution to this thing? And if it doesn't work, everyone's totally okay with it because you tried your best, right? And the two stories.
Well, and William, not to throw you off here, but I do think some of the time charities do have the solution. Like they have a highly effective, quote unquote, business model to accomplish the program that their organization is. But so if they had $3 million, like run, off to the races, but they don't, right? So it's just so interesting. Keep going.
Yeah, and the two people. The other big story I had is I was in New York with Scott Harrison, the founder of Charity Water. Years ago, and we were just having a coffee, and it happened to be the end of the year, and I was like, "How you doing?" I was like, "I heard it was the best year ever." This, that, and the other. He said, "It was." He's like, "It's tough though, because in 2 weeks, I'll start with $0 of revenue." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, we raised $50 million last year, but as of Jan 1, we've raised $0." And he's like, "So I got to do it all over again." And I was like, wow, I just had never thought. And I guess he pioneered a little bit, if I remember correctly, the monthly funding gifting model, or maybe some other people done, and he scaled it.
Piece.
But that's still not sustainable revenue, right? I mean, those people can still turn off the spigot anytime they want to. I've made 3-year commitments to charities. I think I've honored all of them, but I know I don't have to, right? They don't have my credit card.
Well, and that's not unlike a subscription, right? Cancel any time, right? What are you doing on an ongoing basis to keep your subscribers?
On that, which once again, in contrast, when I get married a $3 million round, the money comes into my bank immediately, and I can build my budget off of that. And yes, there's a theoretical day where I don't need that anymore. Right? Some people choose the massive jet fuel VC route, and that day lasts longer. But eventually, there still is a day where you make money, and you don't have to ask anyone else for any more money. And I think seeing some of the nonprofit leaders I know try to innovate around this. Have y'all had Brett on, Hagler from News Story?
No.
Okay. You should get Brett. I'll tell some of his story, but he's been innovating for a long time. And his current strategy, so if you've never heard a News Story, eradicating homelessness through building homes was the original idea. They helped build a 3D printer with Icon Homes, where they are 3D printing homes. They built, I think, tens of thousands of homes. But he came to understand a couple of things. One, we could raise money to build a house for the rest of our lives and not fix this problem. Right? And our goal is to eradicate homelessness. So they started thinking bigger. And where they are now, they've actually got a bit of a hybrid model going where they are raising charitable dollars to actually take big swings on R&D and try to figure out just these wild ideas that no one else will invest in because there is no return, right? But that's a great place for charitable dollars. And then he is raising a land fund because turns out homes are great, but owning the land underneath the homes is even better and actually more profitable. So that is an actual, like, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong. He may text me, 12 to 15% return. I mean, this is an investment. They have a waiting list of 4,000 people trying to buy the land, and then they work with local partners to actually build the houses once the land, but then transferring that ownership to people. But I think what's more important to the model conversation is there's a charitable model of their nonprofit that does one thing, and then they have built a market rate at some level return model for another thing.
Okay, so they've built some a financial model into their charitable work.
And I was just at I've seen this more and more. I was just at a conference we were talking about before called Praxis, and there's 12 nonprofits in their accelerator program, and they make everyone, and sometimes it's zero, right? But they have a revenue model and then an earned income piece on top of it. And you can see the ones that are trying to innovate into okay, there's a bit of an earned income here. We just did that at Faith Driven Entrepreneur. If somebody signs up for our teens class, I think it's the first class we've ever charged for, right? It's like,
yeah,
we can do this, or let's at least test it, right? And see.
Yeah, I love that you just brought up Scott Harrison because he's probably my favorite nonprofit CEO. I love his book, Thirst. It just gets into the mind of like building a nonprofit and what fundraising looks like. And when you have no idea what you're doing, like how to be scrappy. But I'm curious, I know you have a lot of thoughts on nonprofit leadership, but why do you think it's harder to be a nonprofit CEO than a for-profit?
Just the ones I talk to, it's just so hard. And entrepreneurship's hard. I can talk about all those things too. But two things come to mind for me. And some of these are a little similar, but I feel like it's very acute in the nonprofit leaders that I know, is they have given up. I just talked about earning a living wage, right? That's often not true with a beginning nonprofit leader, right? It is just often not true. Y'all know better than I do, but I think I'm accurate in saying that. And so the amount they have given up both financially and time-wise, recruiting people to come work for half of their wage. And once again, there's no equity kicker, right? I get to do that sometimes, but it's like, well, if we win, we all win really big, right? It's like, no, over there, I've got Adrian and Brett in my head. They're probably just two of my people I just think about often. With
these nonprofit leaders.
And New Story, just because I've watched their story for 10 years. And I've just been able to be close to it and been a funder and also been a friend. And just, they are recruiting all of these people. And if a grant doesn't come in, they have to let them go sometimes, right? For instance, this is public. Adrian, unfortunately, is in a discussion. The city of San Francisco, new leadership of mayor. Prior leadership was giving them $2 million a year to help fight, and it got cut in the next budget. So he's got a $2 million hole to fill. Let's hope he wins, right? But that's the kind of thing that doesn't, I might lose a customer, but that doesn't happen to me overnight like that. And just the reporting, what you were held accountable to, it just feels so much deeper. I just see all of the constant work. As you said, we joke we're fundraising all the time, but you're actually fundraising all the time, right? And I think I think this is somewhat classic. You probably talked about it. Y'all probably can talk about it better than I can. So come on in. Just, they've given up so much. It's hard sometimes to see to grab people that are going to care as much and who have sacrificed as much, right? Whereas I feel like, once again, I can make everyone an owner of my business. I am very lucky. I do get people that care just as much about my organization, and they are owners in my business, right? Yeah. And so there's a reason for them to care as much. But on the nonprofit side, like, it's hard. And after years, can you still hold on to that, right? Or are you getting people taking a 2-year break and then going back somewhere else, right? And those kind of cycles. And it's just difficult. I'm always amazed that they're still standing, that they're still innovating, that they're still trying, in just such unique ways.
This episode is brought to you by Imago Consulting and co-host and founder Dave Rayleigh's new book, The Rise of Sustainable Giving. You can learn more and pick up a copy at sustainablegiving.org. Again, that's sustainablegiving.org.
Virtuous helps nonprofits grow generosity through personal donor engagement and streamlined workflows. With CRM, fundraising, and marketing tools, Virtuous helps build trust and impact. Visit virtuous.org to learn more. Well, one of the things I'm noticing, even William, as you talk about, the world that you come from, both the financial side, but also just the entrepreneurship side. By the way, I think it's hilarious, given and as a fellow entrepreneur, whatever the failure rates are in the first 3 years of new entrepreneurship, and yet even as you're talking about, you have such a sunny disposition towards the volatility that is, private equity and venture capital and entrepreneurship. And the thing I want to call out for our leaders, whether you're a leader of a business or a nonprofit, is it's about understanding what your organizations, and I use the term natural resources, are.
Yeah, sure.
Like, what are the things that are kind of endemic to your organization that honestly you some days take for granted? When you're having a rough day and you're thinking about, man, I wish I could pay these people more. I might be able to keep them around, or I don't have equity, right? You're also, the inverse of that is, oh, wow, I do. What are those things that are natural strengths for our organization? And so, I think even as our listeners are listening to this, I want you to be thinking about, on those days, your worst days, when you're thinking, man, I wish blank, I had blank or blank. Flip the script there and think about what are those things that are natural and powerful to your organization. And that's one of the reasons we do the show, right? Is to be able to really learn from both sides of that.
Well, I want to say one thing about that. Amen. And also, it's sometimes really hard to see by yourself. So if you don't have people walking with you, if you don't have someone, and I'm talking about somebody really walking with you that knows the ins and outs of your business, not once a year. I actually just had this at a conference the other day. We happen to be doing really well right now at Forte. We'll put it that way. We haven't always. And it was a conference that I go to every year. And I got 2 comments. One, somebody looked at me and said, man, I am so proud of you. You could have quit so many times and you have finally figured something out. And I'm just so happy for you. I just forgotten. You're just in it. You're trying to raise 3 kids, get through the day, get that next sale. And it was just a moment where I had to stop and say, wow, we really did almost give up a few times. And we really did. One of my new phrases to tell entrepreneurs is, one of your main goals is to stay alive long enough to get lucky. And I've seen it true in nonprofit too, right? You finally get that grant, you finally get that opportunity, you finally get that board member that shakes things up, right? And so having people that can do that and really speak into that and remember where you were when. So when you call them, you don't have to start over. This is not a pitch for AI, but I do love one of my favorite things about AI is I can go 3 days without asking it. And I go back and look at ChatGPT and I can just say, do that again. Or I don't have to refresh its memory, right? On what we were talking about for that. It's like it was 1 minute ago.
Yeah.
And so you need friends in your life that it feels like it was 1 minute ago. That you don't have to give the whole story to. You can give them 30-second update and they can encourage you and pull you out of wherever you might be and say, hey, I know it sounds like it's a tough season, but do you remember how this happened last? Do you remember how you got through this last time? Do you remember that, it's not all linear and you may be in a non-linear situation right now, right? But if you remember last time you were in that situation, this random thing happened, right? And one of the other things, there's this amazing nonprofit, Catherine Wolfe and Jay Wolfe from Hope Heals. I don't know if you've seen them speak, but she tragically had a stroke probably 10 years ago. They didn't know if she was going to survive. She's permanently affected by it. They would be incredible guests as well. But the organization is called Hope Heals, because when their group was praying for them and trying to get her alive with their small children, she said, her and her husband Jay said, we had a community of people around us that can hold the hope when we couldn't hope for ourselves. And when you're out on this journey by yourself, or even with a co-founder, I've got one, the two of us get each other, sometimes we can balance each other out. I'd say 70% of the time when he's down, I'm up, and when I'm up, he's down, and that's a beautiful thing, right? When I've had a tough day, he can remind me of the good things, and I love twos. I love that y'all do this podcast together. I think it's really hard alone. If you're alone, this is even more important for you. Like find a soul friend, right? But even in a partnership, there are those 30% of times that we have to go to other people. We're just two in it, and we need somebody else to dig in with us, and it's just of paramount importance because it's not easy.
Yeah. What does that community look like that you're surrounding yourself with? Well, William, this has been super helpful. I want to ask you one more question, and we always like to end all of our interviews with a lightning round, so we'll finish with that. But you've mentioned Forte a couple of times. I hit it at the top of the show, just in terms of the what's happening with mental health in the workplace. Just briefly describe just what is the mission. Well, one, what is Forte?
Yeah,
and then what is the mission of Forte? Because I think it's super cool, and you work with both nonprofits and businesses, so
we do.
It'd be great to understand that.
Yeah, we serve a lot of nonprofits. My co-founder was a Marine for 11 years. He likes to joke he worked for the largest nonprofit in the country for 11 years, which most people don't realize. But the Marine Corps is not paid. So what is our goal? So two stories. Vineet does come from an organizational perspective. He worked in a large nonprofit with a lot of difficult challenges. We'll put it that way. And there were some resources, but not a lot. One of them was a Navy chaplain who goes into battle with them. And what that person can do really well is to hold a sacred space to talk about anything and everything. But two, they're outside of your chain of command, and how important that is to have that outlet. I have more of a personal journey. I'm a recovered alcoholic, as well as just had a lot of mental health struggles through my life, which we don't have time to talk about, but I'm always happy to talk about. But I developed a system of a couple of people on a red alert text chain to just say, I need to talk to somebody. I need 7 minutes, right? You can do profound things in 7 minutes. And to have somebody stop, listen to what I'm going through, ask a few really clarifying questions. Is that really true? You've said this before, whatever that may be. Let's reroute you into reality because you're a little bit out of reality in sort of what you're saying, which happens to me often. I just get in these spirals, and it's just incredibly life-giving. And so the combination of that, when Vineet, as his name, came together, we said, wow, doesn't everybody in the world deserve that opportunity to have somebody trusted to hold a sacred space for them, to have a conversation about life, work, and everything in between. And we can have a long conversation about whether this is right or wrong, but as the workplace becomes more of a place where people are finding their identity and purpose, why isn't that in the workplace, right? And so that's the problem. How do we go about solving the problem? What I fundamentally believe we did is we built a platform. We're the highway between, there's an amazing amount of people in the world that are what we called called to care. They can hold that space for you. They can ask those questions. They need a little bit of training, which we provide, a decent amount of training, but they have the innate gifts to do that. If you're listening, you're probably thinking of those 2 to 3 people in your life right now where you call them, and it's totally okay to monopolize 95% of the conversation. And they are just going to ask you good questions, help ground you into space. So we take those people and we build the highway for those people to care for everyone else in the world, because a lot of people need care in the world. And we serve everything from standalone restaurants like Chick-fil-A or Slim Chickens to remote tech companies who know they can't see and feel their people all the time, to nonprofits, to churches, to K through 12 schools. And we've been able to build a training academy to provide those, we call them guides, to people to talk about that. Our overwhelming approach is what we call mental fitness. And the two things we're really trying to, if there's a question around, somebody asked me the other day, what's different in the world if you succeed? And what's different in the world if we succeed is that there's been a fundamental shift in mental health in the same way that it's happened in physical health, right? If I asked you both, and I'll speak quickly because I know we're coming to time. If I asked you both when the last time you saw a physical therapist was, it's probably when you got injured. It's probably when you tore something or you needed to fix a crisis moment. But if I asked you both when the last time you ate healthy or worked out, it's probably in the last couple of days, right? That shift in physical crisis to physical fitness is very well established. But in mental health, for the most part, it's when
crisis. You wait till it's on the breaks.
When it's off the cliff, we'll find you a therapist, right? And by the way, you might have to wait 6 weeks. And by the way, it's expensive and hard to access and all those things. So it's reactive mental health, as you just said. And so we want to bring that. Mental health is good. Therapy is good. I've been a beneficiary of it. Typically, clinically, serves 5 to 7% of people, and it's hard to access for all those reasons. We want to build mental fitness, and that's what we talk about. So we have built the number one proactive service to say, let's get in front of this a little bit. And there's an amazing guy, Eric Scalise, who wrote a book called Lay Counseling as well, that says 90% of people, he did the research, not me, having a trusted confidant is just as good or better than therapy. But it's really hard to build. Like I said, we've built the highway for that. So that's what we do. And we've been lucky. We served, we've served over 10,000 plus people, got 1,100 reviews to get on my entrepreneur soapbox because I'm told I have to always be selling. We're really proud of it. 95% of people say their well-being's been improved, over 1,000 reviews, and 96% say they're more present and focused in their calling, whatever that may be. And that's what gets us up every day to keep doing what we do.
Love that. And we'll talk at the end of this podcast about where people can find you. But before we do that, we want to move to the lightning round that Dave mentioned. So we have like 6 questions. You don't know what they are.
I don't. For those listeners, I don't. They sent me a couple. These aren't on the list.
Yeah. So just say, the first thing that comes to your mind.
Ooh.
Ready?
Dangerous.
Okay. The first one is, if you could instantly become an expert in any skill, what would it be?
Oh, to make my marriage better, skiing.
Skiing. Yeah, we have to go one layer deeper. Is that because you stink at skiing and your spouse is better? Oh, okay.
Because my wife is an excellent skier. And her dream would be to jump out of helicopters and William not die.
You're like, honey, I can't keep up with you.
Yeah, William to do it with her and not die.
That's great. Okay, what's your guilty pleasure TV show or movie?
Oh, gosh, there's so many. I love movies. I'm going to go combo of La La Land and gosh, you asked me on the spot. The one about the drummer with Miles Teller, same director. He's my favorite director. He makes you really think about Whiplash. I am fascinated with this director. He also did First Man, but those are my favorite. Go watch La La Land and Whiplash and think about it through this lens. He's the only director I've seen, I'm sure there's more, but he's one of the few that lets you decide the end of the story. And at the end, when it fades to black in Whiplash, I'm not going to ruin it. And at the end of La La Land, when it fades to black, I think the audience is stuck with, did they make the right decisions? And I think it makes you wrestle with that. And as an entrepreneur, I think it's huge because there may not be an answer, but you sit there. And one of them, I was screaming that Ryan Gosling was a moron and he made the worst mistake of his life. And I looked next to me and the person with me was like, oh, what a beautiful story. I was like, no, he made a terrible mistake. What are you talking about? So go watch those two. I just think they're beautifully entertaining, but also make you think. Whiplash is a little intense. That's why I do both of them, because one's a little more, breathy.
La La Land is also my favorite movie. And I've never heard anyone else say that that's their favorite movie. So I love that.
I love
I also lived in LA for a while, so there's like a lot of nostalgia of Toyotas and things like that.
It gets me.
Okay, if you could donate $1 million to any cause, what would it be?
My wife and I have a real heart for single moms. So whatever that looks like, whatever they need, sometimes it's transportation, sometimes it's other things. We talk often about how hard it is with the two of us, and I can't imagine being able to do it, having to do it alone.
That's great. What's the most random thing on your bucket list?
Eating sushi in Japan.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been dying to do it for like 15 years. I'm just obsessed with the culture. Speaking of another great movie, Last Samurai is one of my favorite movies with Tom Cruise. And I've just always I read books about the Japanese culture. I just love everything about it, from tea ceremonies to sushi to the whole thing. For some reason,
gotta get over there.
For some reason, I've never gotten there. So that's what I want to do.
All right. What's a surprising fact about you that most people wouldn't guess?
Ooh, I feel like I'm a relatively normal human. What is it? I mean, I'm slow. I can't do anything athletic. That's not the answer. There's no surprise. Like, I've got a 40-inch vertical, and you would never guess. I would probably say that probably deep in my soul, I'm probably still a gamer, and I really love any type of game. I've got my little 7-year-old playing regular Nintendo with me right now, in a controlled environment with controlled time limits. But that, like, a weekend with some friends and an N64 with some GoldenEye would probably be just an incredible weekend.
Classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right, last question. If you could switch lives with anyone for a day, who would it be?
Oh, these are good. I'm trying to think. Maybe because it's just happened. It's I'm going to just go top of my mind. Nicky Gumbel just hosted the huge Alpha conference in London. And I think I've never been on the other side of one of those giant 10,000 person conferences. So some version of Nicky Gumbel meets Tony Robbins. I'm a semi Tony Robbins fan as well. And just to be able to see what it feels like, both two ways. One, just how do you pull together 10, 20,000 people to get in a stadium and for some version of making their lives better, right? They're all there desperate to improve something, right? To say, I think you can help, right? I think you can help me be better. And so one, to feel that experience, I love public speaking. I love being on a stage, but I've never been on one remotely that big. So I might just run away, but I'd love to experience it. But two, to be able to hear all the stories that pour out. I'm a storyteller at heart, and I just love hearing. I draw connections in my head, and I just love hearing, this thing led to this thing, led to that thing, led to this thing that led to this thing. And I just think invariably at one of those giant events like that, you're going to be hearing that for like 10 or 20 years. And every time I hear that, it makes me smile. So some version of Tony and Nicky would be my answer off the top of my head.
Love it. Yeah, those just to be able to both experience it, like you said, and learn. And that's awesome. Well, William, thanks for just your time and your investment, both just in kind of, again, the journey you've had and how that intersects with both causes and with businesses. And I just think it's just such an interesting thing to see your gifts at play, in not just the financial side now, but in the broader entrepreneurship and creativity side. So thank you for joining us today.
Such a gift. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hey, so if people are interested in Forte or in you, what's the best place? What are the best places to go ahead and check that out?
Me personally, I have an awkward limit on LinkedIn, so I post there often. So you can find me at William Norvell. Okay. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's my creative outlet to build community there. On Forte side, getforte.com. Pretty simple. You can find us there. We'd love to hear more about you, and if we could serve your nonprofit, we'd be grateful to do so.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. And for our listeners, I hope you learned something today. I hope you were challenged, that your perspective was shifted, and that you just continue to grow and innovate from there. Until next time.
We want to thank all of our sponsors for supporting Season 6 of the Purpose and Profit podcast, including Virtuous, Faith Search Partners, Dickerson Baker, Share, Synergy, Avid, and Imago Consulting. For more episodes of the Purpose and Profit podcast, visit purposeandprofitpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love it if you would rate the show and write us a review. Follow the show on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. You can also sign up for our email newsletter to get the latest updates. Thanks for listening.